Artificial intelligence, the biggest educational advancement. There are two scenarios that can come from AI being used as a tool for education. Scenario 1, education becomes equal for all. Scenario 2, AI creates large gaps between groups of people. In scenario 1, there are two theories that would make the scenario possible. The first one being technology becomes less expensive as time goes on, and the second one being organizations aid in funding for poor communities. In scenario 2, there are gaps created between two sets of people. The first set being between the rich and the poor, and the second being between average and gifted students. AI has already presented itself in schools nationwide on a small scale. In the future, AI is anticipated to control every aspect of the workday, helping children decide their own daily lesson plan, giving aid to each child with specialized teaching techniques, and focusing on the child as an individual instead of as a large group. Schools will progress continuously, meaning instead of having a new school year start every September, students will be able to progress at their own pace. Some schools that are integrating some of these features are Khan Lab schools, Summit and Alt schools, Riverbend School in India, and School of One. Sal Khan is the founder of Khan Academy and Khan Lab schools. I'm going to play a portion of his recent TED Talk.
We can mitigate it, but I think we're at the cusp of using AI for probably the biggest positive transformation that education has ever seen. And the way we're going to do that is by giving every student on the planet an artificially intelligent but amazing personal tutor, and we're going to give every teacher on the planet an amazing artificially intelligent teaching assistant. I'm going to show you the early stages of what our AI, which we call Conmigo, what it can now do, and maybe a little bit of where it is actually going. So this right over here is a traditional exercise that you or many of your children might have seen on Khan Academy. But what's new is that little bot thing at the right. And we'll start by seeing one of the very important safeguards, which is the conversation is recorded and viewable by your teacher. It's moderated actually by a second AI. And also, it does not tell you the answer. It is not a cheating tool. Notice, when the student says, "Tell me the answer," it says, "I'm your tutor. What do you think is the next step for solving the problem?" Now, if the student makes a mistake, and this will surprise people who think large language models are not good at mathematics, notice not only does it notice the mistake, it asks the student to explain their reasoning, but it's actually doing what I would say not just even an average tutor would do, but an excellent tutor would do. It's able to divine what is probably the misconception in that student's mind, that they probably didn't use the distributive properly. Remember, we need to distribute the -2 to both the 9 and the 2m inside of the parentheses. This, to me, is a very, very, very big deal. And it's not just in math. It would have been a little science fiction to do with even a traditional tutor. There's a student, we run an online high school with Arizona State University called Khan World School, and we have a student who attends that online school based in India. Her name is Sanvi, and she was doing a report on The Great Gatsby. And when she was reading The Great Gatsby, Jay Gatsby keeps looking at the green light off into the distance. And she's like, well, why does he do that? She did some web searches, and people have obviously studied this and commented about the symbolism of that, but none of it was really resonating with her. And then she realized that she had Conmigo and that she could talk to Jay Gatsby himself. And so, splendid choice, old sport. I am now Jay Gatsby, the enigmatic millionaire from F. Scott Fitzgerald's Classic. And so why do you keep staring at the green light? The green light, old sport. It's a symbol of my dreams and desires, you see. It's situated at the end of Daisy Buchanan's dock, across the bay from my mansion. I gaze at it longingly as it represents my yearning for the past and my hope to reunite with Daisy, the love of my life. And what was cool is, Sanvi had said, I had this long conversation. She called him Mr. Gatsby. And at the end, she actually apologized for taking his time, which I thought was very polite of her. But you can imagine this unlocks learning literature, learning you could talk to historical figures. We're even probably going to add an activity. You can talk to like the Mississippi River. It brings things to life in ways that that really were science fiction even 6 months or a year ago.
These clips show how the world of AI can positively affect education. This software is already being used in many schools all over the US. As you can see, the AI bot can assist in their learning without the need for teacher intervention. The first direction that this revolution can go is it can create an equal or almost equal learning opportunity for all. AI is a very expensive, exponentially growing technology. But historically speaking, as technology becomes more and more advanced, the less advanced models drop dramatically in price, giving access to the less privileged. If the first theory fails, the second theory predicts that it is likely that wealthy sponsors will notice the impact of the technology and want to help the less fortunate by gifting them the technology or putting money towards getting them the adequate resources. The second scenario is rooted in the inequality of the educational revolution. The first aspect of this scenario is the growing gap between the wealthy and the poor. It will never be possible for the poor to catch up because even if the technology is given to the poor or becomes cheap enough for them to have access, it will be the technology that is old and no longer to the level of the wealthy. The second aspect has to do with the gap between the gifted and the normal students. The normal students will learn at a typical pace, and the gifted will skyrocket in their knowledge. The previously gifted students, who would end up in collegiate level classes at age 12, will become almost normal with the AI programs being able to adapt and teach at the highest efficient learning level for each student. This graph describes scenario 2. The green equation represents the rich from aspect 1 and the gifted from aspect 2, as they both excel from the technology at hand as it increasingly helps the students more and more. The red equation represents the poor population and on-level students. They will forever be behind the green equation, and if you look at the black dashed line, as time goes on, that line will continue to get longer and longer, pushing the two groups apart. The variables we will discuss pertaining to this topic include predetermineds, facts that are inevitable, wildcards, details that are possible but not likely, critical uncertainties, changes that could tremendously differ the outcomes, early warnings, events that are happening or did happen that warn of future issues, and embedded assumptions, topics that are widely assumed without necessarily being proven. There are 5 predetermineds that are identified with this topic: AI prevalence, money, fairness, politics, and education. AI is already everywhere, meaning it will have to also occupy education. The technology will always cost something to someone, meaning that money will always be a factor. With the intelligence that is created by AI for some people, there is also a population that it will not reach, creating unfairness in all aspects. AI will be a part of all political campaigns because the power of AI is left in the leaders' hands. Education will never be eradicated, even if very few people utilize it, because it is deep-rooted in all histories. There are 2 wildcards that are very interesting to think about. One being education could become unnecessary if AI were to take over all jobs, because there will be no need to learn a trade or get an education past learning how to take care of yourself. The second wildcard is younger labor ages. Due to how soon children are able to decide the career paths and specialize their curriculum, children are likely to be more prepared for the workforce earlier, creating concerns with maturity and dangers in the work area. There are 2 critical uncertainties that have been identified. The first being replacing of jobs. AI is already replacing jobs in many companies, putting workers out of a job. This will create an economic problem because if people aren't making money, they can't buy anything to keep the economy afloat. The second critical uncertainty is access to student data. AI will have full access to student data from the students who are currently enrolled in AI schools. This likely means that AI will be able to emulate emotions, making it harder for humans to combat its intelligence. There are 2 early warnings that have been identified. The first being AI is not meant to take over traditional education. Instead, it is meant to be used in collaboration with current techniques. The second being the lack of knowledge. AI is still fairly new, and there is not enough knowledge about how AI is learning from humans to be able to be using this on students without teacher supervision. There are two embedded assumptions about AI in education. The first is that AI will be able to take over and defeat the human race, but that is not likely if we know how to combat it. The second is that AI can simulate and comprehend things like human emotions. It is not possible to confirm or deny this assumption because there has not been enough information that pushes the determination one way or another, but it is possible that AI will be able to emulate it, but not truly feel the emotion as a human does. Going to surprise the human race. But the big assumption should never be that people are ready for it. People can never be ready enough.